The war between humans and the Volante Empire had lasted for 300 years. Billions of people had died on both sides. The Volante were an ancient race with silver skin and eyes that glowed like purple and gold jewels. They lived for centuries and had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. When the war began, they believed they would crush humanity within a single decade. They were wrong. Humans fought with a madness that the Volante could not understand. Other species surrendered when defeat was certain. Other species ran away when the odds turned against them. But humans charged forward into impossible battles. They died by the millions, but they never stopped fighting. The war that should have ended in 10 years dragged on for 3 centuries, and the Volante Empire began to crumble. Queen Seraphina Vareth watched her empire bleeding to death. She was over 400 years old, tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal. She had ruled for 2 centuries, and she had never known peace. Her advisors told her to keep fighting. Her generals promised victory in another decade, another century. But Seraphina could read the numbers. She could see the truth that others refused to accept. The Volante were dying, not just in battle, but as a species. Their birth rates had fallen. Their colonies were empty. Their young people had grown up knowing nothing but war, and they had lost the will to build families and futures. If the war continued, the Volante would win their final victory over the ashes of their own civilization. So, Seraphina made a decision that shocked both species. She proposed a marriage alliance with Earth. The idea was ancient, drawn from traditions older than space travel itself. A royal marriage between enemies, binding 2 peoples together through blood and ceremony. It had worked before, in distant ages when the Volante had made peace with other species. It could work again. The United Earth Council debated for months. Some called the proposal a trap. Others saw it as their only hope for survival. In the end, they agreed to send a candidate. They chose a man named Daniel Cole. Daniel was 34 years old. He'd been a soldier for 15 years, serving in the special forces units that fought the most dangerous missions against the Volante. He was good at killing. He was good at surviving. But the war had taken everything else from him. His unit had been wiped out on a colony world called Haven's Rest. 40 soldiers had gone down to rescue civilians from a Volante bombardment. Daniel had been the only one to come back. He still saw their faces every night when he closed his eyes. He still heard their voices calling to him from the flames. When the council asked him to marry an alien, queen, and live among enemies for the rest of his life, Daniel said yes without hesitation. He had nothing left to lose. No family, no friends, no future worth protecting. If his death could buy peace for humanity, then his death had meaning. That was more than he had dared to hope for. The wedding took place on a space station called Concordia Prime. It hung in the darkness between stars, belonging to neither side. Daniel wore ceremonial robes that felt strange against his skin. He stood at an altar made of crystal and light, watching as his bride approached. Queen Seraphina moved like water flowing over stones. Her silver gown trailed behind her for 20 feet. Her face was beautiful in a way that made Daniel's heart ache, but it was the beauty of winter, of frozen lakes and empty skies. When she looked at him, her eyes held no warmth. The ceremony lasted 6 hours. There were prayers in 3 languages and rituals that Daniel did not understand. At the end, they exchanged blood, mixing drops of red and silver in a golden cup. When it was finished, Daniel Cole became Prince Consort Daniel of the Volante Empire. The 300-year war was over. That night, on the Imperial ship that would carry them to the Volante homeworld, Seraphina spoke to Daniel for the first time. "You understand what you are," she said. Her voice was musical, like bells ringing in a distant tower. "You are a symbol, a pet dressed in expensive clothing. My people will tolerate your presence because I command it. But you will never be one of us. You will never matter." Daniel looked into her ancient eyes without flinching. "I understand perfectly, Your Majesty." "Good." She turned away from him. "Then we will get along well enough." For 3 years, Daniel lived as a ghost in the Volanti court. He learned their language until he spoke it without any human accent. He studied their history and their art and their customs. He trained in their fighting styles, though the instructors laughed at his human weakness. He attended ceremonies and banquets as a silent decoration at the queen's side, enduring the whispers and the insults of nobles who hated everything he represented. But Daniel also watched. He listened. He remembered. He noticed that Seraphine's hands trembled after difficult meetings with her council. He noticed that she stood alone at windows for hours, staring at the stars with an expression he could not name. He noticed that she never ate in front of others, that she flinched at sudden sounds, that she carried herself like someone waiting for pain that never arrived. The Volanti court saw a cold and perfect queen. Daniel began to see something else. He saw a woman who had been alone for centuries, a woman who trusted no one and expected nothing but betrayal, a woman who had sacrificed her happiness for her people so many times that she had forgotten what happiness felt like. On the night of their 3rd wedding anniversary, Serafina found Daniel in the palace library. He was reading a Volanti book about ancient military campaigns. "Why do you study our wars?" she asked. "To understand your people," he replied. "We have had peace for 3 years. The wars are finished." Daniel closed the book and looked at her. His eyes were steady and calm. "No, Your Majesty. The war is waiting. It always is." She studied him for a long moment. For the first time in 3 years, something changed in her expression. The ice cracked, just a little. "You are not what I expected, Daniel Cole. Neither are you." She left without another word. But something had shifted between them. The wall that separated them had developed its first small crack. Neither of them knew it yet, but everything was about to change. The storm was coming. And when it arrived, Daniel Cole would show the Volanti Empire what a human could really do. The peace held for 2 more years, but Daniel could feel trouble coming. He had learned to read the Volanti nobles, to understand their gestures and their silences. What he saw worried him deeply. The noble houses had never accepted the treaty. To them, peace with humanity was not wisdom but shame. Their glorious empire, ancient and powerful beyond measure, had been forced to bend its knee to a species barely out of its cradle. They smiled at ceremonies and spoke polite words, but underneath their silver skin, hatred burned like poison. Commander Varric Thorn was the most dangerous of them all. Varric was a military hero who had fought humans for over a century. He had won famous victories and lost 2 sons in battle. His hatred for humanity had become the center of his existence. He gathered supporters in shadowed rooms. He whispered promises of glory restored and honor reclaimed. He waited for his moment. That moment came on a cold morning in the 5th year of the peace. Varric stood before the Imperial Council, surrounded by hundreds of noble witnesses. His voice rang through the great chamber like thunder. "Our queen has betrayed us," he declared. "She has polluted the throne with human filth. She has made us weak and vulnerable. The humans breed like insects while our numbers shrink. In 100 years, they will outnumber us 10 to 1. And then they will remember what we did to them. They will come for revenge, and we will have nothing to protect us except a worthless treaty and a human pet." Half the council rose to support him. Daniel stood at Seraphine's side, feeling the hatred of the crowd wash over him like heat from a fire. These were not politicians playing games. These were true believers ready to die for their cause. Queen Serafina rose from her throne. Her presence commanded silence. "The treaty has brought us 5 years of peace," she said. 5 years to rebuild. 5 years to strengthen our worlds. Would you throw that away for wounded pride? Pride is all we have left, Varric answered. You have stripped us of everything else. The council voted. The treaty survived, but only barely. Daniel saw how close they had come to disaster. He saw how many nobles had sided with Varric. The rebellion had not succeeded today, but it would come back. It would grow stronger, and eventually it would explode. That night, Daniel found Seraphina on the balcony of their chambers. She was staring at the city below, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. It is coming, she said without turning around. I cannot stop it now. How long do we have? Months, perhaps a year. Varric has too much support in the military. If I move against him, half my fleet will rebel. If I do not move, he will grow stronger until he can destroy me. Daniel joined her at the railing. The wind was cold against his face. What happens to the treaty if Varric wins? What happens to Earth? Seraphine's voice was empty. If Varric wins, he will burn your homeworld to ashes. He will not stop until every human in the galaxy is dead. He believes it is the only way to save our people. Then he cannot win. She turned to look at him. In the starlight, her silver skin glowed like moonlight on water. Her eyes held something he had never seen before. It might have been fear. It might have been hope. You would fight for us? After everything we have done to you? After how we have treated you? I would fight for peace, Daniel said. I would fight so that no more children grow up without parents. I would fight because that is what I was made to do. For the first time in 5 years, Seraphina touched him by choice. Her hand, cool and smooth as polished stone, rested against his cheek. I have done you a great injustice, Daniel Cole. I treated you as a symbol when you were a man. I am sorry for that. Your Majesty. Seraphina, she corrected him. When we are alone, call me Seraphina. Something changed between them that night. It was not love, not yet. They were too different, had suffered too much for something so simple. But understanding began to grow. Trust put down its first fragile roots. Over the following months, they worked together as true partners. Seraphina had intelligence networks and ancient alliances and political tricks learned over centuries. Daniel had something different. He had a human mind, a willingness to think in ways that the Volante found uncomfortable. Your people planned too far ahead, he told her during one of their strategy meetings. You think in centuries. That is a strength, but also a weakness. Varric expects you to build alliances slowly, to prepare for decades before you act. You need to think faster. Think in days and hours. Strike before he believes you are ready. She listened. More importantly, she believed him. They reached out to neutral houses with offers of alliance. They positioned loyal military units at critical points throughout the Empire. They even made secret contact with the United Earth Council, arranging for supplies and support that would not look like human interference. When Varric's rebellion finally exploded, it came 6 months earlier than his supporters expected. Seraphine's preparations had not been perfect, but they had been enough to survive the first strike. But survival was not victory. Varric controlled too many ships, too many soldiers, too many weapons. The first battles went badly. System after system fell to the rebels. The loyal fleet was pushed back toward the homeworld dot on the eve of the battle that would decide everything. Daniel made his request. Let me fight. Seraphina stared at him. You cannot be serious. You are the prince consort. If you die, if we lose this battle, we all die anyway. I was a soldier for 15 years before I met you. I know how to fight. I know how humans fight. And Varric has never faced humans in real battle. He only knows us from reports and stories. That is his weakness. My nobles will never accept human soldiers in their ranks. I do not need soldiers. Give me one ship. Something fast, with a small crew of volunteers. Let me hit them where they are not expecting it. Let me show them what a human can do. She should have refused. Every rule demanded it. Every tradition screamed against it. But she had learned to trust this strange man who had become her partner. What do you need? Daniel smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a wolf seeing its prey. Just point me at the enemy. Catherine's Gate was the key to everything. It was a point in space where 6 major travel routes came together. Whoever controlled the gate controlled movement across half the empire. Varek's admirals knew this, so they had gathered their strongest ships there. 200 warships surrounded the junction, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets, open like eggs. They were waiting for Queen Seraphine's fleet to arrive. They had prepared careful formations and battle plans refined over centuries. They were absolutely certain of victory. They had not prepared for Daniel Cole. The ship was called the Wanderer. It was a scout vessel, barely larger than a shuttle, designed for speed rather than combat. Its crew consisted of 6 volunteers. 3 were Volanti, who had served under Daniel during his years at court and believed in the peace. 2 were human engineers who had been stranded in Volanti space when the war ended and had chosen to stay. The 6th was Daniel himself. They dropped out of hyperspace directly behind Varek's command station. It was an insane maneuver. The transition speed was far too high, the angle far too steep. The Wanderer's shields failed completely during the jump, leaving them naked and vulnerable in the middle of the enemy fleet. Every ship in Varek's armada turned to track them, but Daniel had not come to fight fair. He had spent 5 years studying Volanti military tactics. He had read every book in the Imperial Library about their naval battles. He understood their patterns, their formations, their weaknesses. The Volanti fought with perfect coordination, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship would be. It was beautiful and deadly and utterly predictable. Humans were not predictable. Humans were chaos. Before the enemy targeting systems could lock on, Daniel fired every weapon the Wanderer possessed. Not at the enemy ships. At the command station's communication array. The array exploded in a cascade of sparks and fire. In an instant, the links between Varek's admirals and their fleet were severed. 200 warships were suddenly blind and deaf, unable to coordinate, unable to receive orders. For 30 precious seconds, the enemy armada was paralyzed. Now, Daniel ordered, "Take us in." The Wanderer dove into the chaos like a fish swimming through a school of sharks. The pilot, a young Volanti woman named Kira, flew with desperate skill, threading through gaps that should have been impossible. The enemy ships tried to track them, tried to fire, but they kept hitting each other instead. 9 of Varek's ships were destroyed in the first 3 minutes. Not by the Wanderer, by their own allies, confused and firing blind in every direction. It should not have been possible. It broke every rule of naval warfare. But Daniel had never cared much for rules. Communication was restored after 2 minutes. Varek's admirals finally regained control of their fleet. But by then, the damage was done. The perfect formation had become a scattered mess. Ships that should have been supporting each other were now in each other's way. And then, Queen Seraphine's loyal fleet arrived. They had been hiding in a nearby asteroid field, waiting for Daniel's signal. 150 warships burst from cover and slammed into Varek's disorganized forces. The battle became a storm of fire and metal. Through it all, the Wanderer kept fighting. Daniel directed his tiny ship through the chaos, striking at weak points, disrupting enemy formations, causing confusion wherever he went. He was not trying to destroy ships. He was trying to create openings for the loyal fleet to exploit. The battle raged for 6 hours. Daniel lost 2 of his crew in the fighting. A direct hit killed one of the human engineers instantly, A Volanthi soldier named Tarek died when he threw himself over a damaged console to protect the others from an explosion. Daniel felt each death like a knife in his heart that he could not stop. Would not stop. When the tide finally turned, it turned fast. Varek's ships began to surrender or flee. The rebel flagship, a massive vessel called the Sword of Vengeance, tried to escape but found itself surrounded. Its captain sent a message of surrender. The Battle of Catherine's Gate was over. Daniel was barely conscious when Seraphine's ship found the Wanderer drifting among the wreckage. The little scout vessel had taken 17 direct hits. Its engines were dead. Its life support was failing. Emergency lights flickered in corridors filled with smoke, but Daniel Cole was still alive. Sarfina came to him in the medical bay. She pushed past the doctors who tried to stop her. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, her perfect composure completely shattered. "You impossible, reckless, magnificent fool," she said, and then she kissed him. It was their first real kiss. It would not be their last. The rebellion did not end at Catherine's Gate. There were still pockets of resistance, still commanders who refused to surrender. But the heart of Varek's movement had been destroyed. Over the following weeks, system after system returned to the Queen's control. Commander Varek himself was captured trying to flee to the outer reaches of space. He was brought before the Imperial Council in chains to face judgment. Daniel attended the trial. He stood at Seraphine's side, now truly her partner in every way that mattered. He saw the hatred still burning in Varek's eyes, the absolute refusal to accept what had happened. "You may have won this battle," Varek spat at them, "but you have doomed your people, Queen. The humans will never forget what we did to them. One day, they will turn on you, and you will have no one to blame but yourself." Seraphine's voice was cold as ice. "Perhaps. But that day is not today. And tomorrow, we will work to make sure that day never comes." Varek was executed. His followers were imprisoned or sent into exile. And the Volanthi Empire began the long work of healing. But the story of Daniel Cole had only just begun. Word of what happened at Catherine's Gate spread across the galaxy. The tale grew larger with each telling. The human prince who had turned the battle. The man who had fought like a god against impossible odds. The warrior who had proven that humans were not the weak, short-lived creatures the Volanthi had always believed. For the first time in history, the Volanthi began to look at humanity with something other than contempt. They began to look with respect. Victory had a price, and Daniel paid it in nightmares. He woke screaming 3 times in the first week after Catherine's Gate. His hands reached for weapons that were not there. His body twisted to dodge missiles that had been fired months ago. In his dreams, he was still in the Wanderer, still watching his crew die, still flying through fire and death. Serafina held him through the worst of it. Her alien body was strong enough to handle his thrashing without injury. She did not fully understand what he was experiencing. Her people had techniques to seal away trauma, to log painful memories in mental boxes where they could not cause harm. But she learned. She asked questions. She listened. "You carry your wounds inside," she said one night, after the shaking had finally stopped. "We seal ours away. I do not know which way is better." "Neither," Daniel admitted. His voice was rough from screaming. "But my wounds keep me human. I'm not sure I want to lose that." Their relationship deepened in those difficult months. What had started as political necessity had become real partnership. And partnership was slowly becoming love. They talked for hours about their peoples, their histories, their hopes for the future. They argued sometimes loud and fierce about decisions that needed to be made. They also laughed together, which surprised them both. Daniel began attending council meetings not as a decoration, but as a true advisor. His human perspective proved valuable. He saw problems that the Volanthi missed. He suggested solutions that would never have occurred to minds, trained to think in centuries rather than years. Slowly, the nobles who had dismissed him as a curiosity began to treat him with respect. Not all of them. Some would hate him until the day they died. But they were becoming a smaller group every month. The United Earth Council sent an ambassador for the first time in 5 years. Her name was Patricia Wells, a sharp-eyed woman with gray hair and a face that showed decades of difficult negotiations. She met with Daniel privately before the official ceremonies. "You have done something remarkable," she said. "When we sent you here, we expected you to survive. Maybe gather some useful information. We did not expect you to become a legend." "I am not a legend," Daniel replied. "I am just a soldier who got lucky." "The Volanthi do not believe in luck." Patricia leaned forward. "They are already writing songs about Catherine's Gate, the human who fought like a god, they call you. Do you understand what that means? It means they are exaggerating. It means they are afraid." Patricia's eyes were serious. "The Volanthi have never been afraid of humans before. They looked down on us. They felt sorry for us because we die so young. But they were never afraid. Now they are." She paused. "Fear can become hatred, Daniel. Or it can become respect. What happens next depends on you." Daniel understood. He had been given a voice that would be heard across both civilizations. How he used that voice would shape relations between humans and Volanthi for generations. He chose to speak about common ground. In his first formal address to the Imperial Council as a full voting member, Daniel talked about the colony world of Haven's Rest, where his unit had died. He talked about the Volanthi soldiers they had fought and the Volanthi civilians they had tried to protect. He talked about a Volanthi child who had given water to his dying sergeant. He talked about a human medic who had saved a Volanthi officer's life even as bombs fell around them. "We have spent 300 years learning how to kill each other," he said. "Perhaps it is time we spent a few decades learning how to live together." The speech was not well received by everyone. Some nobles called it human propaganda. Some demanded that Daniel be removed from the council. But others listened. Others began to think Queen Seraphina announced a cultural exchange program. Human artists, scientists, and teachers would be invited to Volanthi worlds. Volanthi scholars would visit Earth. It was a small step, but small steps were all they had. Daniel threw himself into the work. He traveled to human colonies that had been destroyed in the war, helping to coordinate rebuilding efforts. He negotiated trade deals that benefited both species. He started a foundation to support children who had lost parents in the fighting, both human and Volanthi. And every night, he returned to Seraphina, to the chambers they now truly shared, to the life they were building together. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him one evening. They were watching a sunset over the capital city, 2 suns setting at different speeds and painting the sky in colors that had no names in human languages. "Leaving your people, coming here, becoming what you have become." Daniel thought about the question carefully. "I regret the years I spent alone. I regret the friends I lost at Catherine's Gate. I regret every day of the war that might have been prevented." He took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth against his palm. "But I do not regret you. I do not regret us." She smiled, and it transformed her alien face into something warm and tender. "I was so certain I would hate you. You were supposed to be a burden I would tolerate until death freed me. Instead," she paused, searching for words. "Instead, you became my partner, my friend, my home, and you became mine." They stood together in the fading light, 2 beings from different worlds who had somehow found each other. The future was uncertain. There would be more challenges, more crises, more moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But they would face those moments together. For now, that was enough. news of their relationship spread. At first, there were whispers of scandal. A queen in love with her human consort? It was unthinkable. It was improper. But as months passed and the empire grew stronger under their shared leadership, the whispers changed. People began to see what Daniel and Serafina had built together. They began to believe that maybe, just maybe, two species could learn to live as one. Hope is a powerful thing. And for the first time in 300 years, both humans and Volanthi began to hope for the same future. 10 years had passed since the wedding on Concordia Prime. Daniel Cole stood on the observation deck of the Volanthi flagship Herald of Dawn. Through the massive windows, he watched 300 ships assembling for the first joint human-Volanthi expedition into unknown space. Ships from both civilizations flew in formation together, their crews mixed, their mission shared. He was 44 years old now. Gray had appeared at his temples, and lines had formed around his eyes. The Volanthi doctors had offered treatments that could slow his aging, that could give him centuries instead of decades. He had refused. His humanity was not a disease to be cured. Serafina joined him at the window. After 10 years of marriage, he still found her beautiful. But now it was a comfortable beauty, warm with shared memories and private jokes and small moments that belonged only to them. "The council is furious that I am joining this expedition," she said. "They believe a queen should stay in her palace and direct events from a safe distance." "What did you tell them?" "That I have spent too many centuries directing things from a distance. It is time I experienced something firsthand." She glanced at him with amusement. "I also told them that my husband would be impossible to live with if I let him go without me." Daniel laughed. "You know me too well. I know you exactly well enough." They had both changed over the years. Serafina had learned to relax her rigid control, to trust others with responsibilities she had once guarded jealously. Daniel had learned patience and diplomacy, the art of achieving goals without direct confrontation. They had taught each other. They had made each other better. The galaxy had changed too. Human ambassadors now served on Volanthi worlds. Volanthi scientists taught at Earth universities. Mixed communities had grown on border planets, creating new cultures that belonged to both species and neither. Children had been raised by parents of different races, growing up with perspectives that crossed the old boundaries. It was not perfect. Prejudice still existed on both sides. Old hatreds did not disappear in a single generation. But the foundation for something better had been built, and each year it grew stronger. "Do you remember what Varric said at his trial?" Daniel asked. "That I had doomed your people by bringing us too close together?" "I remember. He was right, in a way. The galaxy will never be the same. Our peoples are too connected now to ever fully separate. Whatever happens in the future, we will face it together." Serafina nodded slowly. "Is that such a terrible thing?" "No." Daniel squeezed her hand. "I think it might be the best thing either of our species has ever done." A voice came over the communication system, announcing final preparations for departure. In 1 hour, the fleet would enter hyperspace. They would travel to the edge of known space and beyond, mapping new stars and discovering new worlds. Perhaps they would find new civilizations. Perhaps they would find wonders beyond imagination. Whatever they found, they would face it as one people. Daniel thought about the man he had been 15 years ago. A broken soldier sitting in a council chamber on Earth, accepting a mission that everyone expected would kill him. He had nothing left then. No family, no friends. No reason to keep breathing except stubborn refusal to stop. He could never have imagined this. He could never have dreamed that his sacrifice would lead not to death, but to life. Not to an ending, but to a beginning. He had come to the Volanthi as a symbol, a political tool, a human dressed in borrowed clothes. He had become a warrior and a diplomat and a bridge between worlds. But more than anything, He had become a husband, a partner, a man who had found meaning in the most unlikely place in the universe. The fleet began to move. 300 ships slid into formation like a single living creature. At the center, the Herald of Dawn led the way, carrying a human and a queen toward whatever the future held. On the observation deck, other crew members had gathered to watch the departure. Humans and Volanti stood side by side, their differences forgotten in shared excitement. A young human officer was explaining something to a Volanti engineer, using his hands to draw shapes in the air. A Volanti pilot was teaching a group of human cadets a traditional song of departure. Daniel watched them all. This was what he had fought for. Not victory. Not glory. This moment of connection. This proof that peace was possible. Serafina leaned against his shoulder. It was a casual gesture, comfortable and familiar. 10 years ago, she would never have allowed herself such weakness in front of others. Now it felt natural. "Do you think they will remember us?" she asked quietly. "In 1,000 years, when our species have fully merged, do you think anyone will remember how it began?" Maybe, maybe not. Daniel put his arm around her. But it does not matter. What matters is that they will exist. Future generations who never knew war between our peoples. Children who grow up thinking that humans and Volanti being friends is normal. That is worth more than any memory. The stars stretched into lines as the fleet jumped to hyperspace. The unknown waited ahead, full of danger and wonder and possibilities beyond counting. "Ready?" Serafina asked. Daniel smiled. It was the smile of a man who had found his place in the universe. A man who had lost everything and gained more than he ever dreamed possible. A man who had fought like a god and loved like a human. Always, he said, the Herald of Dawn carried them forward into the light of new stars. Behind them, the old divisions faded into history. Ahead, a future built by two species together, stretched out like an endless ocean. The war was over. The peace had held, and humanity had proven, once again, that there was nothing in the universe they could not achieve when they fought for something worth fighting for. The end.